This episode is brought to you by Modal Electronics, who enable you to play and perform powerful sound with their incredible synthesizers. You can enjoy vibrant wavetable patches with the Argon 8 series, or you can produce with state-of-the-art analog-style synth textures with the Cobalt 8 series. To check out Modal Electronics' incredible array of synthesizers, go to modalelectronics.com. Modal Electronics. Dare to sound different.
Killer Queen.
So you can pinpoint the exact moment.
I know where I was standing. I can give you a rough estimate of how many grown-ups were in the room. I know exactly what the stereo it was coming out of looked like. And, you know, I was probably four years old or 5 years old, maybe 4.5. What was it, 72? So yeah, I was almost 5. It came out in 72 in the summer. And up until that point, the radio was just sound. Whatever, you know, I kind of put together songs, you know, maybe, you know, mommy and daddy talked about music or sang a little or did this, and then the radio was on, or they're playing records, but it was always just sound. There was nothing to it. And then that came on, and there were a good half dozen, you know, adults, you know, giants standing around, and they just kept talking. I was outraged. And I think I went over and just put my head next to the speaker and, you know, why are you talking? I, you know, maybe had a tantrum. I don't know. But yeah, it was everything. It was everything I ever, in my almost 5 years, had ever hoped could happen. And then, so I started staying up late at night, pretending my parents must have been, you know, so ecstatic that I would fall asleep at night, but I actually was just pretending to fall asleep at night. And I would crawl over to get out of bed, get over next to the clock radio, and which had been put on the floor so that the glow in the dark dial didn't keep me awake. And I would turn it on really low and just start panning through radio stations to, you know, which I'd never done, to see if I could hear this sound come out again. And I must have found our station KGON, which at that point was called KGON. I'm on KGON. And it was like their bumper stickers were rainbow and some clouds. And I didn't hear Killer Queen quite yet. I heard Radar Love. And that was equally mind-blowing to me. So at some point, I have an older brother. So at some point, I kind of must have put together that this was rock. And that's what, you know, the big kids talked about, or cool. This is what it feels like to be a big kid and to be a cool one. And that's why it's different than other music.
Absolutely. I mean, Killer Queen is definitely pretty, you know, when you hear that for the first time, it's otherworldly type of record. I mean, like so many of their records. When did you start making your own music? When did you first learn how to play?
I got this cassette 4-track that I still use to write and record quickly, because I'm very quick at it, and that's very important. I think when you're just trying to get ideas down and have the feeling and everything there, you just get as much down quickly as you can. So much to the chagrin of my band mates, a lot of it starts there, and then I bring it in and we futz around with trying to separate tracks out and get them into the computer, the studio. But yeah, I was probably 13 or 14 maybe when that, maybe probably 14. And I couldn't believe it. You can record 4 tracks. I later found out you can actually record 7, but you have to bounce them together. You know, the first 3 go on to 4, the first 2 go on to 3, and then you've got 2 available tracks. So that also helped me learn how to mix, because ultimately tracks 1, 2, and 3 bouncing onto one track, you can't adjust the levels anymore. So you're going to bury things, and what needs to get buried and what doesn't need to get buried. What can't be buried, or you have to start over, go back. That all came from just, experimenting and trying to figure out why my home recordings don't sound like records that I buy, that are recorded at, Olympic Studios or Air Studios by Glyn Johns or whoever. So I had it was a big job for a 13-year-old, but I learned a lot about how to do it satisfactorily, and I also learned how to make it get me off, and that's all I really cared about, just to be alone. And I was a drummer, so I didn't really care about playing my stuff for anybody else. I had no inkling that I would ever do that. I just wanted to be a drummer, and a really cool one. And then
you started on drums?
Yeah, and I was in, marching band. I was in symphonic band. I read charts. I can write music. I went to music college. I went to a very, very jazz-oriented music college, where the teachers were the jazz cats like Mel Brown or Thera Memory. And they would just give each other's jobs at this community college that had a great recording and jazz program. And I wasn't really into jazz. I just, I probably liked Chet Baker and Astrid Gilberto, and that was about it at the time. So it was hard going to that college for me. Took a lot of crap off the teachers. They were not white guys, and they they just thought I was silly, I think. But yeah, so that's kind of how I learned to do all this stuff. And then at some point, maybe in my early 20s, I had got the singer in my band had stolen my girlfriend and kicked me out of his band, which ultimately I think were the 2 best things anyone has ever done for me in my life. And I just, I moved Peter Holmstrom back from New York, and we put a band together. First we just hung out a lot, and then he said, he started hearing what I was doing in the middle of the night on my 4-track, still a decade later. And he said, and he liked it. And he had basic guitar. He could play folk chords, and he could bar the 2 chords, E and A. And so he would just learn my late night ramblings to myself. He would just learn them, and said, let's just do it. Just write more lyrics, or don't write lyrics. Let's just put a band together. Because all my friends were musos. They weren't cool. They could play Bohemian Rhapsody on piano and sing it. And they were dorks, So he just they had terrible taste. And those were horrible times for music. The early 90s, shoegazer had kind of fizzled out, had come and gone. And, it was like Queensryche and all sorts of really, rap rock was really coming on. And, it was just, things looked bad for guitar music. Grunge, of course, had become completely commercialized by then. And so my stuff, I guess, was pretty stony, dreamy, post shoegazer, and slightly gothy too. And he just started learning them, and then we just added people to the band to just make something happen. And we practiced in the laundry room of the basement of our apartment. And we got Hedford, and then we ended up getting Zia. And I just wanted people that, didn't really play instruments. because they would bring, Pete and I tried a couple other, you know, good musicians out for, you know, bass or whatever, and they brought a lot of bad habits and a lot of just dumb ideas. So it was just easier for Pete and I to have people that just wanted to be in a band because it was cool to be in a band. And then we just kind of figured out how to do it. You know, I had never stood up and played guitar with a guitar strap on. I had never sang into a mic and heard my voice come out of a monitor. So we all kind of learned together, and it made it easy. And we all had, the important thing was we all had social skills. We all had a car. We all had a phone. We all had an apartment and a job, and we could keep our shit together. And we had communication skills, and we enjoyed it. We wanted to do it together, and we didn't want to argue about stuff. And it just kept working, you know. And we did argue about stuff, of course, for several years. Finally, you know, maybe 5 years in or something was the last argument. And now it's been like 26 years or 27 years. I think we're 27 years in now. And I mean, we haven't had any real argument. We haven't had bullshit like that, you know, except maybe the occasional, you know, you need to get some lunch. We'll talk about this later. That kind of, you know, get a nap, get lunch, sound check's over. We don't really need one. Let's just take care of ourselves here. And our mental health will come. We take care of our physical health. So that's about, you know, that's kind of how that works. Also, you learn things like, Pete, I need you to talk to Zia about this because I'm going to scream if I have to talk to her about it, you know, or Zia has to go to Brent to talk to me about this, or I have to have Zia talk to Brent about this, or Brent has to have me talk to Pete about that, you know. So there's a lot of diplomacy that you learn.
Well, I guess keeping a band together is infamously hard, but that sounds like it's a very peaceful dynamic. Is it a misconception to say that you guys got signed after your first show?
That is a radical misconception.
Yeah, seems.
We got signed after our third show.
After your third show?
Yeah. Just had. I worked at the door. I was security at a blues bar, like an old man blues and jazz club. You know, I don't know if you could really call it security, but I was security when the bikers came, when biker bands played. That was pretty rough, but I had long hair. You know, they were cool with me. Everything was fine. But occasionally Monkey Presents, the local production, kind of cool production company, would stick bands in there, like Joan Jett, you know, toured, want to do a small club tour. So, you know, so I knew the head dude there. And one day I said, hey man, I got a band together. We've got like 6-7 songs. We're going to start playing out. And I think we had played, you know, 2 or 3 shows. And then he came to the laundry room in the basement to see a practice. We played the song Genius off our first record, and he is like, yeah, you know, crazy chain smoking, glasses never quite stayed up, and you know, this is great. Button down collar shirts from the 60s with the sleeves torn off. Chains rock, export A Legers. You're the best cigarettes, man. You guys are awesome. I'm signing you. Let's put out a record. How many more? Spray them all for me. And that was it. We were on TK Records.
And so at that point, I mean, it seems like you were very level-headed as a band, in terms of not falling out too much, you know, not having arguments. Aside from putting together music, you know, on like in your own time, on your kind of cassette player, tape recorder rather, had you ever been in a recording studio or anything before making the debut album?
I had been in a recording studio once as a drummer. It was in an old barn that they had rehabbed, and it was very cool. and that was the only time I'd been in with a band. All of my studio experience had been in recording class in music college. So there wasn't a lot of experimentation. That was absolutely learning technical skills of recording and mixing and IOs and bus sends and that sort of thing. So all the true experimenting came at home on my cassette 4-track.
And are you, because right from the word go, pretty much, you put quite a kind of tongue-in-cheek sense of humor into your songwriting. Was that I mean, it must have been a conscious thing. Why did you set out?
I didn't know how to write. I didn't know how to write songs. I learned how to play guitar from, picking up, what's that chord, and then put my finger, that's a C, so that's how I learned how to play guitar. I bought a synthesizer, for $50 off someone. I traded drum lessons to my karate instructor. And then he just gave me his fake Les Paul. So I had a guitar, I bought a microphone, a delay pedal that looped as well. And so that was kind of, there it was, I had noise reduction on this cassette player, so I could pop that off, and that was pretty heavy compression. So I learned about compression. I learned about that it's got 5 or 6 bands of graphic EQ on the left and right channels, so you can record through that. So I learned about slamming, 1200 hertz into a heavy compression setting for vocal tone. I learned where a bass instrument wants to sit, what's more important of dominating the low end, a kick drum or a bass instrument. And, just all those sorts of things that make you a producer, that allow you to get results quickly in a real studio. The Dandies have never recorded, ironically, ever recorded in a real studio. We've always borrowed gear, bought gear, rented gear, and built our own studios we would find warehouses and rent a floor or, half a floor or whatever, empty a business office or something. And we would just make our own studio, and then we would record ourselves with a local engineer buddy. And then we would get a mixer we loved, like a real deal, international mixer. And we would then get serious about, going to Hollywood or London or New York to mix. But the artsy, experimental side of it, we wouldn't go in and record in a week or record in 4 days or any of that shit that people do. We would spend a year, 6 months, 3 months, 12 months, whatever it took.
Really? So, but earlier you mentioned that when you're writing, it kind of comes quite quickly to you, but then you take longer over the recording process. Why is that?
Because I'm not a songwriter. For years, I never thought about it. I wasn't a kid who sat and wrote poetry in school. So I had to wait for inspiration, and then it would all kind of blob out at once. A few lyrics or a whole idea of a verse, and then this other lyric that maybe would be a chorus, but it means it's all this idea of how I feel, and it matches the guitar parts or the keyboard part or whatever starts it. Get that recorded, and then I saw Bob Dylan say something like, when you're in it, you get it finished and get out before you ruin it, something like that. So I kind of had that in my mind, although, there was a song on Earth to the Dandy Warhols that was, I finished 15 years later. And so there are a lot of instances of, I can't really come up with a truism for how I do it. But
sort of different every time.
Most of the time, yeah, fuck yeah. Most of the time I just want to get it get it done while I'm feeling it, and the music part and the lyric part all line up with what's happening in me emotionally, psychologically, that makes me need to get this out, you know, which is a compulsion for sure.
Do you still write a lot? Like say this year,
I've never written a lot. I'm just not a prolific writer. So every song I've ever written has been recorded and released on a record. Until last summer, I started keeping a journal by writing and recording a 30-second long song, and they get posted every Friday on all our socials and YouTube, our YouTube channel. And that was an interesting year to do that, because we had, you know, we've got this crazy caveman, like Neanderthal president, creating a civil war. Then we've got the re-election coming up. We've got then the entire West Coast catches on fire. We have to evacuate our homes. I mean, it was nuts. Like, so I'm writing through all that, just one short little song every week, making a video to it. Sometimes the whole band would play on them. Sometimes none of them would play. Sometimes it would just be Zia or just Pete and I, you know. So that's the most prolific I've ever been. And Peter is very good at making me just get shit done. And if I, you know, if I waffle about getting it, I don't have any lyrics. It's not your job to be inspired. It's your job to get it done. Say anything, you know.
How long did you do that for?
I'm still doing it. It's been going since last summer. Yeah.
My God, I'm looking forward to checking that. That is a ton of work, because I mean, absolutely, trying to keep up any schedule of creative work is exhausting. How did the idea start?
I don't remember. I think it was somebody had said, you can only put a 30-second clip up on TikTok. And I thought, oh, that'd be cool. Yeah, we should just do that. And we were sitting around with our manager at the studio, and I said, has anybody done that? Just made 30-second songs and videos, just posted one like every week. And he said, no, you should do it. And I was like, I can handle that. And yeah, it's become, you know, sometimes frustrating, sometimes cathartic, sometimes, you know, just a nuisance. But it's always satisfying when I'm done. And, you know, I feel like, you know, Friedrich Chopin, or one of those guys that just said, I'm no different than a cobbler. It's my job to do great work every time, and to do it when it's needed or on command, if that's how it works. I don't have to wait around for inspiration. I am a musician.
Yeah, there's got to be some truth to that, although some people refute that and say that they can only write when inspiration strikes them. But if you've got the talent,
well, then they don't have it.
And so I wanted to ask about a few, you know, and please forgive me for cherry picking some certain things from your career that I just feel like you know, in a podcast like this, I have to ask about. The first is, do you get bored of playing Bohemian Like You?
Never. It's never the same twice. We don't play along with a click track and recorded backing instruments. I mean, we're just four people with, you know, twanging on strings and banging on drums. I mean, they're all sort of blank canvases every single time.
And when you recorded that, and you know, when you recorded that, did you think that it was going to be? Because would you say that record kind of elevated you guys to the next level? I mean, I remember that being on the radio just all the time. Did you think you'd made a classic riff and a classic record?
Yeah, it was. The thing is, when you're making a record, you know, every song is an emotional imperative in your life from the previous year or so. whenever it was written. And so you're still close enough to the same person that every feeling is still a huge part of you. Therefore, you can't understand why any of these songs isn't the hugest hit. And it may, perhaps they could be, you know. For example, Bohemian Like You, when we released it, was the lowest charting single we had released to date.
Wow.
Right? So, you know, it had to get re-released. It had to be on a commercial. And then of course people were, you know, would say, oh, well, it took a commercial to make that big. So yes, well, every commercial has a song in it. Is every song in a commercial a hit? Well, of course not. There's, you know, only one a year, one every 10 years, you know, back then. No, never happened really. You know, clearly it had it in it. That song had it in it. You know, record labels bumble and drop the ball, or don't even show up to the game, or, you know, whatever. So there's a lot of factors that make a hit a hit. And who knows, maybe every single song in that record, or every single song we've ever made, in the right situation, would become a treasured and cherished part of millions of people's lives and regarded as a hit for all time, you know. But for us, it was that was our big one. Obviously, on the previous record, we had Boys Better, Not If You're the Last Junkie on Earth, and Every Day Should Be a Holiday. Those were the key players, but Junkie was the big one off the first. When we were getting called.
Was that your first hit?
Yeah. And that was, you know, it was such a gimmicky at the time thing that we were, of course, you know, getting called a one-hit wonder. So, you know, it was nice to have Get Off become a pretty solid high charting single on the next record. The Bohemian failure to perform was pretty weird, but, you know, it wasn't rap rock, it wasn't post grunge, it was, you know, it was this thing that no one was doing, you know, which was kind of garagey, and you know, then it became a smash hit, and so then we were a one-hit wonder again, and that was our one hit.
But we used to be friends after that was enormous.
We put out Used to Be Friends, and people finally quit saying we were one hit wonder.
So that must have been pretty satisfying to not be, because Bohemian Like You probably became so massive that it became bigger than you guys. It was like, it was one of those songs that becomes bigger than the band for a while. But We Used to Be Friends definitely changed that, and the fact that the albums were so solid. You know, every song was great, and I know what you mean about, you know, you think that every song should be a single, and it's just different factors that affect what gets released, what does well. Did you consciously change direction sonically with We Used to Be Friends and that album?
Yeah, we, you know, the
Monkey House.
There is a very reactionary element to every record, just because I grew up like that. You know, I was a punk rocker when I was a sophomore. When I was a junior, I was a mod, you know. And you just, you know, as an artist, as an artsy kid, you just changed your style once your style became kind of too popular. You just change. That's what you did, you know. You know, I felt that for the Dandy Warhols Come Down, the first major label record, I really felt that shoegazer did not need to be over. And you know, and I had a big fuck you attitude about it, because there was nothing, it wasn't replaced with anything better. So, you know, we really wanted to make this creamy, dreamy, shoegazery kind of, you know, very late 80s, early 90s English thing, which was, you know, 4 years out of fashion, which is terribly out of fashion, but we didn't care. We just thought we were cooler than everyone else. So who cares? You know, you know, you're going to buy Kid Rock instead of that. Okay, fine. You know? And then we really liked for 13 Tales, we really liked another thing that also was very uncool at the time, which was Bob Dylan Desire, Working Man's Dead, you know, those very dry, very bone and sinew records, no exciting, high-end, crispy, exciting sizzle, no flap, no fat, you know, just instruments. So that was kind of what our thing was with 13 Tales, was that. And then we were sitting after a show in the Raw Bar, which was below the Metro in Chicago. And we're sitting there, and, you know, at that point, you know, the White Stripes had happened, Jet had happened, the Strokes had happened. It was a wonderful world of garage comeback, amazing songwriters and talents. We were so happy. We really felt like our people had arrived, you know. And I think I had heard plenty at that point. And we were down there, and the jukebox from this old bar that had been there forever, shucking oysters and serving you beer, had like Sade. They had Planet Earth by Duran Duran came on. Gary Newman, Down in the Park maybe came on. And I couldn't believe how fresh and amazing and interesting, and oh my God, it just sent me. And I can remember the feeling just sitting there with my band, bunch of haircuts sitting around with us. Everyone's having a good time. And I just turned down the line of the characters in my band, and I just go, I'm sorry, you guys, but I know what the next record we're going to make is going to sound like. And it ain't going to be garage rock. And so, you know, they all just kind of, when we started that record, you know, a few months later, they all were like, let him go, you know, let's see what he does. What does he do with this stuff? And it was, you know, I needed that. There was also a band at the time that was also doing the, you know, kind of synth thing. And they didn't really have a lot of success, but they sure made some cool records. And I think they were like a Northern Midwest band, and they had a single called Agenda Suicide, and I can't remember the name of the band, but if you look that up, it is cool. It's like a hardcore sort of synth, tough, with kind of a psychotic Simon Le Bon thing going on. But that was, The Faint. They were called The Faint. And so I felt like that was, they sort of, I found them. Oh yeah, I remember them. I found them reassuring, very reassuring when that song came out. You know, I felt like, okay, this is the right time. Direction. And so I knew that record would become successful just because of the timing of it. And it did. It worked great. I got in a fight with the little bitch that was the president of Capitol at the time, who is the new president. And so we never got to release You Were the Last High, you know, functionally as a real single. It just kind of, you know, they sure, yeah, we're releasing a single. They don't do anything or really make any attempt to give the thing a go at success. But when our management at that time went and had it tested, you know, with the K-Rock people, and they came back that would have been a top 15 single, is what their information told them. And you know, the new president of Capitol, I don't care, man, I don't care. And he just had his attitude, you know, he had this attitude of, you know, he had taken, you know, and had things remixed by like old men of his generation that weren't any good at it, and they had done us a lot of uncool. He was a very uncool guy. He was like that classic douchebag from the old days, you know, where they take your art away from you. They take photos and would retouch them and make us look tan, shiny, and it was just asinine. So that, you know, that kind of was the end of the dream. That was sort of our really our last record. Then the record we made after that was a get dropped from the label record, where the first song is like a 9.5-minute jam, and then the second song is about an 8.5-minute jam, and then the third song is about a 6.5-minute jam. So after that, we got dropped.
Well, on Auditorium.
Yeah.
And well, it's definitely you've not stopped just kind of doing whatever you feel like doing. That is for sure, because Tafel music means more when you're alone. Last year was a crazy album. What was the inspiration for that?
Well, we've been collecting, you know, absurd bits of equipment and musical instruments, you know, for years. And Peter just said, let's record every instrument we own, which would be in the couple hundreds of just instruments, of junk, garbage, or prized possessions, you know. So we just started, you know, and I'm not a prolific writer, so I'm not gonna, I said, great, let's do it without any lyrics, you know. We can really go, you know, really go out there. You know, although at the time I was also listening to US Maple a lot, if you know who that is or was, and that's some pretty abstract
US Maple,
you know, stuff with a singer on every one, and it is straight up tweaker. And I bless them. I'm so proud of them. The bravest band in history. You know, they're just, I can't believe they would just get up, open for Steve Malkmus and do this, get shit thrown at them, get screamed, you suck at them. I mean, they were
really,
wow. They were gods, just little gods. I love them. Yeah, check them out. They were great. But so I, you know, we opted to not lyrics. And then when the New York Dolls were over having dinner with us one night, Zia got Sylvain to translate. She just wrote out this short dialogue bit. He translated it into French, and the two of them did it. So there's one that has spoken word on it in Toffel Means More. But other than that, you know, it's just vibes, just a perfect ambient, this kind of vibe, or what do we want this? And also ambient music and electronic ambient music was so canned sounding, you know, it just, so we had a lot of loose, you know, uncompressed, unchopped congas, and, you know, just ratty, organic, natural sounds, badly played. And, you know, so it's really loose, and it's what we kind of all felt we would like for ambient music. And then it was just a matter of going, okay, this one goes great, that's the salad course, you know, it's bright, it's crispy, this one has a lot of congas and seems very jazzy, that's beforehand, that's the cocktail hour. This one goes whoa, 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 whoa. That's soup, you know, liquidy and warm. And so then, you know, we organized it into that, and then kind of that helped us to really flesh it out. We had met a new chef, or our chef had brought in his buddy who had graduated top of his class from the Cordon Bleu School, and was just a monster. He still cooks for us, Dustin Getman. But he had done a 9-course meal for us, so we knew that, you know, that we could do this and do 9-10 courses and have music for each course, and each course is going to be about a half hour, you know. So that's how that record happened. Then I wanted to put film to it too, And then I had to get, the actual recipes for the food. Let's actually make a dinner, of courses. And of course, I'm a wine collector. I'm a major wino. So, wine pairings for all of it. So that was a massive burden. And I was doing the 30-second songs at the same time last year when we were posting that Toffle Tuesday, Warhol Wednesday, Monday's Metal Moment, Fast Friday, 30-second song.
And so in terms of like your, like all of the titles, all the lyrics, and you say that you're not a kind of like a writer, but there's such a lot of wit in there. Where do you reckon that came from? All the way back from Killer Queen, and that kind of wit?
The witty, snotty, probably from P.G. Woodhouse, probably from Monty Python.
Yeah, there's a bit of I can see a Python influence.
Oh yeah,
sure. English
humor has always been a big part of my life. So, and also just how fucked people are and the absurdly stupid the world is, and then you think you're smarter and then it turns out you're not. And that's how could you not have that in your songs?
Yeah, it helps you deal with it.
It does. And that's all my songs are, is at the end of the day, they're just my personal therapy. So they are going to reflect what's going on in my head, regardless of whether it seems schizophrenic or not to anyone else.
Yeah, that's a interesting and but apt way of phrasing it. So as this podcast is called Greatest Music of All Time, I'm interested to know who for you, like which artists, are the ones that are most sentimental to you, provide you with the most sentimental value. Who's the greatest for you?
Simon and Garfunkel, Astrid Gilberto, and then just that whole slew of the greatest of greats. You can't, Zeppelin, AC/DC, Sabbath, Jimi Hendrix. That whole thing is a real wow. And then everything great. I don't have really any hipster obscure shit that really moves me. I am moved by the Sisters of Mercy and the Sex Pistols, Bauhaus, The Cure, everything everyone likes. That's what I like. There's nothing really, I had very unique taste in music for a suburban kid, but now it's not anymore. I have completely normal taste in music. I'm the guy in Duran Duran that goes, and what's in my bag, Led Zeppelin 4, I've never had it on vinyl. And then, you can see that, whatever Nick is just, not impressed. So yeah, I don't care. I like what everybody likes. I have pretty normal taste. I like the legendary greats. They are great for a reason.
Yeah, I agree completely. Courtney, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and I hope you continue to do, whatever you feel like doing. And I can't believe I can't believe I missed the 30-second songs, the weekly songs.
Well,
so I need to check them out now.
Yeah, my cousin said he's like, "What? I follow you," and I was like, "Oh," and he showed it to me, and it's just a random front image. And it says, "It's a fast driving Friday with the Dandy." Who's going to know what that is? So I started putting all caps. This new Dandy song here now, all caps, is for a fast driving Friday on a 30-second blah, 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 So it started to pick up a little more, But yeah, check them out. And if you really have the free time, go through them in order and just watch the news. It's just like, it's pretty weird. It's fun in the sun. And by the time autumn comes and everything, it just gets dark, really dark. And then once we get a new president in, it's kind of light and fun again.
If you're enjoying the Greatest Music of All Time podcast, you can keep up to date with all of our latest episodes for free by subscribing. If you're watching on YouTube, the subscribe button is located at the top of the Tom Cridland YouTube page. It's also at the bottom right of any video that you watch on YouTube. If you're listening on an audio platform, such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can subscribe at the top of the page.